today we're joined for this Frontrunners session by Emily Davis, a leader of the orchestra for many years with the European Union Youth Orchestra and now a leader of many other orchestras. And we're going to be looking at the question of how a project like the Café Bauhaus project, music, innovation, sustainability, a chance for our players to make their own projects. What's Emily's journey through that been, and what can that help teach us about how you can make amazing projects yourselves?
Yes, so I think this is a wonderful topic, something which is very important to me, and I feel quite strongly about that we should be talking about more, especially with people at EUYO who are at this point in their career where they have questions themselves about which direction they want to go in. I think I was quite fortunate that the point that I was finishing my studies and I was going through EUYO, there were quite a lot of opportunities to sort of go into auditions and go into a freelancing, quite a busy freelancing scene in the United Kingdom. But already in the last decade that I have been working, there have been so many dramatic changes in that scene. We've seen a lot of funding being cut. Obviously with Brexit, we see a very changed environment for the actual work and traveling and touring. And so I wanted to reflect a little on that myself and think about how we can have more autonomy over what we're doing. And actually not even just that, but how we can use our creativity and the things that we really aspire to do and put those into our own projects. And it's a very exciting opportunity, I think, when there is some difficult things going on in the arts industry, that we can turn this around to create opportunities for ourselves, not just to make our own work, but actually to harness our creativity, which is something I think all of us want to do, otherwise we wouldn't have ended up here at the EUYO.
Yes, and I think you put that beautifully. It's this opportunity and creativity and autonomy you talked about. Why do you think autonomy might be important for us, for people who are kind of developing careers?
I think especially in the classical music world, when you start very young and you go through many stages, you go through many institutions probably studying, it often feels like there's a very set path into the world that we are doing. And I know I felt at some point, probably in my early 20s, when I was doing EUYO, that I had made a lot of my own decisions about where I wanted to study, where I wanted to go, but I didn't feel like I had very much control in seeing what the end game would look like in terms of where might I win an audition, or where might I actually end up being able to have a job in an orchestra or a teaching job somewhere, because that's really in the hands of other people. And I think it's so important that we actually realize our own creativity and our own determination that has got us this far actually could go in the direction of us creating our own career and having our own autonomy over what we are doing.
I think you put such important elements there. This notion of creating your own career rather than being a kind of passive spectator in being placed somewhere in it.
Yeah.
So I think one of the really interesting questions is, okay, you look at a project like Café Bauhaus, but more generally, how for you, let's just hear a bit your story of how you managed to use something like the Café Bauhaus opportunity. You applied in the first year that we had Café Bauhaus. How did how did you react when you saw this opportunity, and what was the kind of story of then internally how it helped you develop?
So maybe I should even just go one step further back, because I formed a string ensemble with a colleague of mine in Scotland, and that came as a result of what I just spoke about previously. And we wanted to create our own ensemble, create our own sort of genre within the classical world. bringing together folk music and classical music and other art forms. So with that in mind, when I saw the opportunity for the Café Bauhaus funding, it completely just ticked every box of what we want to do. And in a world where there is limited funding, you have to be absolutely sort of, that's my goal. That is exactly the sort of scope of what we want to do. So I think we're perfect for that kind of opportunity. So it was just a really fantastic alignment of thinking, we really must apply for funding to get these things off the ground. And this is the exact opportunity for it.
So that's a really good opportunity of the opportunity coming at the right moment. So you'd already, the idea was already there.
Yes.
And that's obviously the best. There's always this thing talked about in funding, which is much better if you move upwards towards some funding rather than see that there's some funding and then try and design something to fit it.
Yes.
So you've got, in a way, your passion was already there. You talked before about this idea of connecting different genres within classical music. You found this wonderful partner in what you were doing who's a folk violinist, and so the idea's there. So I guess it's quite interesting, because I think we all have underneath there are these ideas, and in a way I think step one is discovering your passion, because that's what will drive it. I'm just interested for you personally, what stage and how early were you when you'd kind of realised that?
It was actually quite late, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think I spent so much time on the treadmill trying to achieve the very conventional goals within our world. And then at some point sort of realising that there was a lot of my sort of internal, my ideas and my inspirations that I wasn't really listening to anymore because I was looking to go down quite a conventional route. And so in conversation with my co-artistic director, I realised how much she has created her own career within the folk world. And it's an amazing thing. They are brilliant, business-minded people. And it was just very inspiring for me because she's focused her own sort of innermost ideas into her career, and that's exactly what she is doing. And I could see that we could do that within our world. But the biggest barrier to us doing this is funding, and also maybe a lack of understanding about how to get funding and how to sort of actually form a business model and how to structure this. And I think it's important to say we formed the group, we applied for funding, we didn't get the funding, but we didn't give up.
Yeah.
And then actually that is when I saw this Café Bauhaus opportunity. So we applied for that alongside public funding. And I think that's a really useful thing for people to know, that when you are applying for public funding, it's very, very good to see that you have funding coming from elsewhere. And if you can bring together opportunities and show that you're, not just putting all your eggs in one basket, and that you are throwing the net out and seeing the scope of funding out there, then it's actually going to be much more in your favour.
Yes, no, I'm sure that's right. There's nothing better if you're doing an application that the funder sees, number one, you don't already have enough money, but number two, you have become attractive enough to have some money.
Exactly.
And that's very much built into Café Bauhaus. There's actually this twin thing, which is there's what we call seed money. That's the award. It's seed money to help you get more, plus if we can help you on the development of the project.
Yes.
And actually, I think that the area you just talked about with your co-artistic director, that she was much more savvy, actually, about, how to make an entrepreneurial thing about this. You're a business person going out to make an idea work. And I think you're right that in classical music, we often have more a kind of thing of, well, what we do is wonderful, we should get some public funding. So now just let's talk us through how it worked with Café Bauhaus. You put in an application, you were given €5,000 of seed money, plus any help that we as a team could give. And how did the process work for you?
I think we definitely went down the route of it being seed money because we knew what we wanted to do was quite a large project that would require quite a lot of funding to bring off the ground. But what was fantastic from the EUYO Café Bauhaus side of things was that it really kick-started the whole thing running. And it gave us the first thing to think, okay, well, we want to do a cross-arts collaboration. This is what we want to do. And then we looked into the realities of the people that we wanted to work with, actually how much it was going to cost, and bringing in all of the different artistic partners that we had on this project. We saw it growing and growing and growing, but we used the wonderful team with Rita at EUYO to look through our funding suggestions of things, the budget, to look through how we were writing our application for the public funding. And that was just completely invaluable to have someone cast their eye over that, because there's a very specific kind of language that is needed for funding applications, which my colleague has very well because she's done a lot of it, but is completely new for me. So that was a brilliant, brilliant tool. And then it was also about joining audiences together and joining our social media followings, our own, the EUYO access to social media, all of these things, I think bringing them together, because I think if you can use any connections to audiences that you have just to get your projects out there, that was fantastic for us. So those are the things I can think of off the top of my head. But I think the most important factor was that it was the Kickstarter for us to grow the whole thing.
Very good. What's your advice to young musicians who might be thinking, this sounds quite interesting, but what would my project be?
Yes. I think that's the source of it all, because I'm very sure that somewhere within all of us classical musicians, there's something which gets our juices flowing a little bit more. So I would suggest, first of all, look ahead. If there's an application coming, try not to leave it until the day before to write something, and I say that from experience. But start thinking now, where are your passions within what you do? What are the things you've done as a student, as a child even, as a young adult? What are the things that you've done which have really made you open your eyes and think, I really like this? And think about how you can use it, not only for yourself, but for social impact, or for audience growth, or for your fellow colleagues. Just think about something that's going to touch people outside of your own experience, and then just give it time to percolate and something will come.
That's very good advice. In a way, there's two really interesting steps there. So what you're talking about. Step one is actually it's almost a kind of listening to yourself to find out what it is that drives you and what interests you. And number two, this question about who is that for? Yes. I always think that that's such a key thing. Yeah, who's the audience? Then you can kind of design the whole thing.
I actually think that's probably one of the most important things when you are writing any kind of application. Is the first thing needs to be who your target audience is. And it's very difficult to target the whole scope of demographics of society. It's much more effective if you have a key group in mind, because that will affect every angle of how you're designing a project.
So who was your project, 13 North? Who was it? Who were the audiences it was designed for?
The audiences we were designing it for really were people who are not predominantly classical music audiences, and more specifically a younger demographic, ideally under the age of 40 really. We see classical music obviously having quite a steady older audience, nothing wrong with that, but we do want to look at how we make it more sustainable and how we can grow that in order to, keep moving forward.
Fantastic. Emily, thank you so much for these initial thoughts. So for those listening, we're now taking this forward to the next stage, and we're looking at a TikTok Live where we're going to come back to you, and with some players, we'll take this whole question forwards and think, how can we help you make your project through Café Bauhaus? Thank you very much.
Thank you.